You might have heard this 1,000 times. Sources say, I'm told, per sources, a league source, a team source, a source close to the situation, an anonymous executive. Scroll your timeline on any big sports day, and that's all you see. When I was a kid growing up as a sports fan, I had no idea what a source actually was. Where they come from, why reporters protect them, what it takes to verify what they're saying, or why two reporters can hear completely different things about the same story, and both can be telling the truth. So to help understand why, I talked to my old ESPN colleague, Jeff Passan. Jeff is one of the most trusted reporters in all of sports, someone whose name has become shorthand for accurate. I asked Jeff to walk me through exactly how all of this works, because once you realize how this actually works, you start to see sports news completely differently. In 2011, Yu Darvish was one of the biggest free agents in baseball, and Jeff Passan got a tip that he was going to sign with the Texas Rangers. It was one of the biggest stories of the offseason.
I knew it was right, but that's not enough to go with. It was 3 hours of me essentially saying to the person over multiple phone calls, can I go with this now? Is this right? The things that you see when I tweet them out, or when I put it on Instagram, it's not just, I got this 5 seconds ago and I'm telling you now. It's a real process to ensure that the information you have is right, and that is chief among everything.
That gap between knowing something and being able to say it publicly is the entire job of a journalist. We all see the tweet, but what you don't get to see is everything that had to be true before that tweet could exist.
Right before first, always, forever, amen.
It sounds simple, but there's a lot of stories that journalists like Jeff, like myself, that have never published that we've heard a lot of rumors and sourcing around. But the reason they don't publish is because you can't confirm it 100%. And we live in this media world where being first, where having speed on a story, where getting that social media engagement is often rewarded with improving our careers and more money. Because in this job, being first and breaking stories can help get you famous and widen your platform and help you make more money. But how do you actually confirm information? What actually goes into confirming what a source tells you? And that brings us back to a question. What really is a source? Because before I was in journalism professionally, I had a very specific idea of what I thought a source was. The reality is a lot stranger than that.
They're all different kinds of sources. You know, there are players, and there are front office executives, and there are agents, and there are doctors, and there are trainers, and there are financial advisors, and there are equipment manufacturers. This is a wide-ranging universe in any sport that you cover.
A source isn't just a fancy job title, but a relationship. Sports, like any other industry, is full of people who know and see different things and have different reasons for talking.
The way I look at sources is that there's a balance going on here. The more I know about you, the more that you've given me information in the past that's been helpful and correct, the likelier I am to trust you going forward and to lean on your information. But I'll take information from anywhere, man. Like random DMs from people. I've gotten scoops from there.
It's all about relationships and confidence. That's what journalism is about. Not access or proximity to power, not how many executives you have numbers to. What matters is whether you've built enough trust with enough people that when something happens, you can figure out what actually happened. Which brings us to the hardest part about being a journalist. When you hear things from two different sources that are conflicting against each other. And that doesn't mean that someone is lying or trying to spin you in an evil and cynical type way. But it does mean you have to parse things out. It can get really complicated. One of the questions I always ask myself as a reporter, whether it's getting information for an article or for one of these YouTube videos, is why do I have this information in the first place? What can my sources get out of me reporting this? And all of that goes into how I frame a story, how I present that information to the public. I'll give you a real example of what I mean. When Mookie Betts was headed towards free agency with the Boston Red Sox, stories started surfacing that he might want out of Boston. And as a reporter covering the situation, the question I kept asking myself was more than just whether it was true, but why I was hearing this and who benefits from me reporting it. Here's what I knew. Mookie, in private and in public with me, was completely consistent about his motivations. He wanted to be paid what he was worth. He wasn't angling for a specific city, he wanted a fair contract, and he preferred to stay in Boston. And that had been true for years, before the rumors, during them, and after. His behavior never changed. So when narratives start floating out there that Mookie might want it out of Boston, I started to ask myself, who does this benefit that this narrative is out there? Because all of this was not coming from Mookie. None of this matched what I knew about Mookie since he was in AAA with the Pawtucket Red Sox. And that's the moment where the job is actually figuring out whether something is true or just useful to someone else. It created public pressure on Mookie to either commit or look disloyal if this information got out there. It shifted the frame of the negotiation away from what the Red Sox were willing to pay and onto where Mookie wanted to play. But it also helped create a media environment that benefited the Red Sox in contract negotiations.
Mookie was not re-signing here. If you believe that he was not re-signing here, and I don't believe that, why do you hold on to him? For an 84-win team to go out and do that again?
In the years after, Mookie's perspective on his contract negotiations with the Red Sox have remained consistent.
How does that sound? The newest member of the Dodgers, Mookie Betts. What's your reaction?
I mean, it sounds kind of weird. I'd been in Boston so much of my life.
I had initially thought that I was going to be a Red Sox for life.
I know people don't believe it, but I did. I wanted to stay in Boston my whole career. That's where I grew up. That's my life. Know everybody there.
And that's what I mean when I say that sources aren't neutral. None of this is philosophical, it's practical, because the job of a journalist is to figure out what to do with this information before you put it out there, how you frame it, how you frame this information so it reaches the public in a way that actually makes sense and is emblematic of what is actually happening. And if you mess up, one miss doesn't just hurt this single story. It undermines all of the conversations and relationships that you've built with sources for years and years. Reporting isn't a photograph, it's a film. And the job of a reporter is to string together all of these photographs so fans and readers have a clear understanding of what's actually happening. But that only works if people trust you enough to tell you the truth in the first place. And that's the part of the job that most of the public never sees.
I'm not out here to get clicks. I'm not out here for engagement on social or for views on anything like that. I think regardless of what the story is, they need to know that I am going to approach it in a really professional way. And what I mean by that is I'm going to be upfront with them. I'm going to be honest about what I'm looking for in any particular situation, and I'm going to communicate very clearly with them so they're not, that there's not a situation where afterward they're like, hey, I wasn't expecting that, or that's not what I thought it was going to be, because I feel like in order to maintain relationships, you can't be bait and switching people.
Because if people break that trust, people stop talking, because a source isn't just someone who gives you information. There's someone who's taking a risk by doing it. Their jobs, their relationships, their reputation inside an organization. All of it is on the line every time they pick up the phone.
What I've found to be most effective is just adult communication. There are going to be some times where things are happening and you need to be willing to head on address that things are here, but I want to do this story the right way. And I think people respect that.
And trust doesn't come from being plugged in. It comes from being clear, from being consistent over a long period of time. That's what differentiates reporting from someone getting manipulated by their sources.
Because everyone has their own version of the truth, And sometimes you might get information that sounds conflicting, but in reality, it's just two different perspectives on the same story.
There's a lot of pressure on reporters to get things right because you're dealing with the reputations of often famous and powerful people, whether they're athletes or executives or billionaires who own teams. And there's a weight of knowing that one mistake could crumble your reputation forever.
Yeah, when you miss, it's not fun. And when Bryce Harper was a free agent, I reported that Magic Johnson pitched him coming to the Dodgers. And I had been told this by a reliable source, but it turned out, that it wasn't right. And it sucks when you miss. It's an inevitability that at some point, even the best reporters are going to get something wrong. 99.9% is not enough. The consequences of misses is exponentially greater than whatever gain there is to having any individual story.
For all of the jokes about insider culture, the scoop artists, the rumor merchants, the gossip factories, this is what the job actually feels like from the inside. And over time, the pressure that shaped the entire industry changed how people think about scoops and getting them out there.
The way that the scoops impact people is a little bit different. I deal dopamine. That's my job.
Scoops don't just inform people, they create a physiological response. The push alert, the rush, the "is it my team" feeling, none of that is incidental to the Scoops economy. It's the product. And Jeff knows this. He built a career on it. But he also came up in a different era, one where the job looked a lot less like Scoops.
When I was younger, before I was in the Scoop game, it looked down on. To me, it was a lesser form of journalism. Someone's going to get something. So what's the difference between knowing something now and knowing something 30 seconds from then? Where my perspective changed, though, was when I started going after more of that transactional news and realized that in the process, getting to know people and getting people to trust you and be willing to give you information, it builds the kind of relationships that allows you to do the kind of journalism that I've always put on a pedestal a lot more easily.
Every source who trusts you with a transaction might trust you with something harder, messier, and more important down the line. The problem isn't Scoops. The problem is when you separate Scoops from the infrastructure that fuels it, because from the outside, this can look a lot like gossip.
Being a sports insider is actually my dream job. Like, imagine your whole career is being told secrets, clocking in for a shift at the gossip factory. When people ask what I do, I say I talk and text all day. and there's a very, very cool thing about that, but it's all of the secondary part of the job, I think, that makes the difference between somebody who gets information and just yeets it out there for the world and somebody who cares about being right.
That's the aggregator, and this is where the system starts to break down. A reporter like Jeff spends years, decades, building relationships, verifying information, absorbing the cost of being wrong. He breaks a story, and within 60 seconds, 30 other accounts have posted it. Some of them credit him, some don't. Most of them have done zero reporting of their own. And from the fan's perspective, scrolling a timeline, seeing the same information everywhere, it all looks identical. The reporter and the aggregator are indistinguishable.
We're the ones doing the legwork. We're the ones finding it out. And if everyone else wants to blast it out into the world, then hey, you do you. But I hope people don't confuse those things because they are very different. I think we have people with a lot less understanding of how news works and operates now because those lines have been muddled as much as they have. I think the accuracy in news media right now, however you want to define, news media, I think citizen journalism is an oxymoron. I think that those two things are incompatible because journalism to me is something that has a set of standards, ethics, consequences. And when you are not abiding by those, you're not a journalist, you're just someone who's trying to get information out to the world.
And when that process disappears, you get the aesthetic of journalism without the substance behind it. And that distinction has been collapsing for years. With every algorithm change, with every outlet that has cut its reporting staff, there's been a lot more that has replaced them with aggregation desks because aggregation is cheaper and the engagement numbers look pretty much the same. The funding model for serious journalism has been gutted. Local newspapers are gone. Investigative teams have been disbanded. Forum bureaus are closed. And in their place, content. Fast, cheap, optimized for the reaction it produces rather than the truth it contains. Because once you can't tell the difference between reporting and everything else in the content monster ecosystem, it gets harder and harder to figure out what is actually real. And this raises a question that's worth sitting with. If the best reporters are as thorough as people like Jeff, why do fans not trust what is coming out of the mouth of so many reporters? Why isn't there more trust in journalism? And in sports in particular, one industry has completely changed how reporting happens, what gets said, what stories get told, what gets left unsaid: gambling. While gambling changed how fans watch the games, it also transformed the entire ecosystem around sports. Journalism and sports are more alike than they seem on the surface because both only work if people trust what they're watching. And once that starts to slip, everything becomes a lot harder to trust. Sports betting has existed for as long as sports have existed. What's new is that it's on your phone, it's in the stadium, it's in the broadcast, it's in the ad break before the highlight reel, it's the banner on the website where you just read a scoops breakdown. It's everywhere, all the time, frictionless, normalized. And that normalization didn't happen by accident. It happened because leagues needed new revenue streams, because media companies needed new advertising partners, because the traditional funding model for sports content, the one that used to pay for reporters and editors and fact checkers, was collapsing. And gambling money was right there, ready to fill the gap. And so it did. And this credibility crisis is what came with it. The problem isn't that journalism is broken. There's still a lot of journalists out there, like Jeff, who are doing things the right way. The problem is that the system, when it's infused with gambling, makes it a lot harder to figure out what the truth actually is.
I just stay away from it. I want nothing to do with it. I'm terrified what's coming next. All that our games have is their credibility. The same way in journalism, frankly. All we have is our credibility. All they have is their credibility. And if there's even a whit of doubt that what you are watching on the field is on the up and up, what's sports then? It's content. It's content to consume. It's not competition to savor.
Journalism isn't just about knowing things. It's about proving what is true in a world where everyone else has a motive. We're in a moment where two crises are converging. Sports fans don't trust journalists as much as they used to. And at the same time, the system rewards that distrust financially for reporters and media outlets. And you can feel it. You can feel that distrust because when a reporter breaks news and one of the first questions that people immediately have in the comment section or the replies is asking, who is this journalist sponsored by? We're living in a system that actively fuels distrust regardless of what the credibility of that reporter actually is. We've lost something, not because the reporter is corrupt, but because the system has made it so that corruption is impossible to rule out. I've sat in these rooms where gambling money is on the table, and the only thing that's preventing me from cashing that into my bank account is not asking specific questions about what is happening in the industry of sports. It's never said, but it's the pressure that's subtly applied by taking on gambling sponsors. Not everyone can say no to that, and that's not a judgment. It's the system that we're living in because a lot of people want to have these jobs in sports media, and they're willing to do anything it takes, and sometimes that means taking on gambling money to just keep the lights on, to be able to pay employees. And I think the only way out of this is if fans start demanding the difference between journalism and content, the difference between reporting and noise. It requires people to give trust to the journalists who have actually earned it, to not just have blind faith or blank cynicism. And I think it's important for fans to figure out who they trust and who they don't. And my hope is that this conversation with Jeff and this video have helped give you the tools to do that. Because if sports loses its credibility, it becomes content. If journalism loses its credibility, it becomes noise. And these days we have way too much of both. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.